guys, how are you all doing? This is Craig here from Bass Lessons Melbourne, and today for the player profile interview I'm joined by Mr. Phil Stack.
G'day,
how are you, man?
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for having me.
You're in town with Thirsty Merc.
Yes.
Doing a bit of a 15-year anniversary tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. What's
well,
going on?
we've been together 15 years as a band. We've been playing together longer as in some individual members. Ray and I have actually known each other for 20 years.
Right.
We were playing jazz things before that. And this was an opportunity to kind of play some of the old songs from the first record and actually also kind of put it out there to the universe, Facebook, to to find out what people wanted us to play that we hadn't played for years. You know, because we've sort of done 4 albums now, so you get that opportunity to play some rarities as well. We've been playing a few B-sides, which is kind of wacky, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you had to go back and relearn.
We literally, absolutely, you know, and we're not very good at rehearsing, so so it's been
There's a bit of homework, or
a little, no, together work, just sort of in the car, have a quick listen. It's an interesting band, and it's a beautiful group of humans that kind of somehow work together, and it's 15 years, and it's been well received. It's probably been one of the most just seemingly popular tours of the last few years for us.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it never gets as big as it was when you start, you know, the first few albums, and
sure.
But it's certainly been there's something about stickability. I think they're still around, and
what's the audience like? Is it people who, do you reckon, have been with you for 15 years, or people who are new to the band? Or
you get a bit of both, but you also get kind of those things that are a nice, well, not a nice mark of time, but let you know of your mortality and age. So we have, you know, kids who are coming who are, you know, now 18, and they were like, oh, you remember listening to with our parents in the car.
That's bizarre.
When car trips, and so they would come with their parents, even sometimes, you know, who, you know, so you get 18 to 60-year-olds coming. Yeah. So mixture of everything, but I think we may be at this stage somewhere in between the still semi-young but old enough to be some nostalgic value with some of the songs where you were in the early noughties or mid 2000s and stuff like that. So people are getting off on that a bit. I think
it was an interesting time in the music industry as well.
It really was.
Kind of breaking point, I guess, with the whole digital age was pretty much start of the 2000s, I guess.
Yeah, it was. It was very, very different, and it was almost like a teetering point of album sales and things changing, and the internet taking over. But the internet was obviously all around, but social media wasn't, and that's a very different thing. We're very pre-social media, so we sort of obviously, you know, you have to reinvent ways of communicating. Yeah. So, you know, if you look at our Facebook thing, it's not gangbusters like some people might think. You know, it might be, I don't know what it is, but 30,000 people or something, and instead of millions of people. But it's a very, very loyal following. Sure. And we stick around, but we're still doing new music. I mean, we put out an album 2 years ago called Shifting Gears, and that was our first independent release ever. Really, besides our first EP, you know, and so that was very liberating and empowering for us. Yeah. And we found out that, you know, there's many different ways of doing things now. So we kind of did that the same way anyone else would do. And that's a couple of years ago, and this is kind of the first tour after all of those tours for Shifting Gears.
And how was it for you going back and checking out those bass lines that you wrote 15 years ago? Were you like, what was I thinking? Or like, oh, that's actually pretty cool?
Yeah, well...
A bit of both?
A bit of both, yeah, exactly. I try not to check it out too much in a sense, because I know how things work with this particular band, and a lot of rock rhythm section playing, you know, things that I liked about it, and the way the approach to recording, which was playing live a lot and playing spontaneously and keeping most of it. not really redoing, especially on those early albums, the Thirsty Merc ones. Also, we did the first album all to tape, to 24-track tape, and there was no. We didn't go, the digital till the very last second. So that actually, I like to keep that in my head, even while replaying them now. I don't want to check them out too much to the point of, having to memorize what I did, because it was improvised at the time. So
even between takes, it would have been slightly different.
Yeah. So in the spirit of it, I definitely checked it out again, and it's like, oh, that's a different guy. Of course, it feels like it. And to honour a nice and I guess balance of honouring it and actually realising where it came from in the first place. So and that's always been my concept with some things. Is that it was improvised. To a certain degree, those first times. I mean, listen to great James Jemison.
I guess the one of the things to take into consideration, I guess, is that it was improvised, but then it became crystallized.
Yes.
And that became what was known as the song.
That's the balance, and that's the balance.
So if there's bits, obviously there's bits where you go, okay, I've got to play that.
Yeah.
But then the rest of it is kind of open kind of thing.
Yeah, it's more a concept of like, the first verse, it's something like this, and then there's space for that, and the second verse, and then...
Or there's the riff that we all got to do.
Yeah,
cool. Because we were talking about Rocco earlier.
Right.
And in Melbourne, I play in a kind of Tower of Power tribute band.
Oh, great.
And I brought it up to Rocco when I spoke to him.
Yeah.
I was like, I've got this band, and he goes, well, my one piece of advice is don't play it like how I played it, because even I don't play it like how I played it.
Yes. Wow.
And I was like, that was really liberating, because poring over these transcriptions and trying to get all these things, and even the transcriptions aren't that accurate. I've come to discover, when I actually listen to him, like, that's not actually what he does, and you hear him playing What Is Hip Now, and it's completely different to the record and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was like, oh, cool, I'm going to take the ethos or the
That's
vibe
very
of it,
important. Yeah.
and then try and make it groove as well as I can make it groove.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in me trying to play his bass line and it not grooving as well as if I was playing that bass line in my style and it grooving harder.
Yeah, and it's also not necessarily great for your own musicality to be conceptually thinking that that's how something has to go to a certain degree.
Yeah. So you guys are pretty free on stage?
Yeah, night after night. We also play with different drummers. We have Mick Skelton's our main guy, but he's also involved in the Baby Animals, and he's in that band, so he has to do that. This tour we're playing a lot with Pete Drummond, who's a wonderful drummer, amazing drummer, amazing technician. So every time we have 3 or 4 guys, we're playing with 3 different guys this tour, mostly with Pete, but also Tim Firth is a wonderful mostly known for jazz playing in Sydney, and Mick, and we play differently, and certainly as a bass player I even sit the time differently with, it's not like, okay, I'm playing like this, you just come with me. It's an give and take. It's a give and take thing, and you play differently and maybe less or more aggressive compared to who you're playing with, and that's the same songs, the same material, same set list sometimes, and it's changing. So that's actually great for us, because that keeps us on our toes, and we like the variance of that. So
I was going to say that it'll keep it interesting for you.
Yeah,
to some extent.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us a little bit about how you came to be Phil Stack, the bass player. Yeah,
well, I was like playing guitar like a lot of people do, a bit, teaching myself.
Heathen.
The heathen, yeah. Not for long,
Okay.
I think I realised.
You saw the light.
Well, yeah, a little bit. It was. I was never going to be a guitar player. I was playing guitar and probably more piano in a way, teaching myself Beatles songs on piano as a kid. Literally a kid, and I wasn't a particularly early starter to sort of formal training. I played a bit of clarinet in the concert band and drums in school stage band, and then literally we're going to form a band, and I'm like, I'll play bass, because I actually had a dream one time of like that. That's it was almost prophetic. The bass god came to me and said, in
a very low voice.
Yeah, exactly. You'll play the bass, and it was this. whole thing. And I sort of went, I need to be a bass player. That's calling for me. And so we started the band, and I was bass player, and I took to it quickly. And I went and bought a $300 through-neck 24 fret, like big piece of wood.
Easy thing to start with.
Yeah, that's right. And a Paul McCartney bass transcription book, you know.
Okay.
And I'd checked out. I'd already been sort of teaching myself to play by ear a lot, which is obviously an ongoing process for the rest of your life. And then that's how that started, that love affair with it. And then the band was writing. This is the grunge era, I guess. By then, this is like 89, 90 when I started to do that. And so we formed our band, and it became a bit of a, you know, the Seattle tribute to the Seattle sound. Yeah. But we always started with original music from the day one. I mean, we jammed on Hendrix songs, and we jammed on the stuff that was going on at the time. So Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, and all that. But we started with original music, which would have sounded, we'd been influenced by the time. And it wasn't until I'd nearly finished high school that I got into the double bass, and that's actually when my love affair with the bass as a soulful thing as part of me, I would say, started. It wasn't until then, in that sense. It was a bit more functional. I loved it, and but it was more about songwriting and using.
It was a tool to
a little bit. And to be honest, the electric bass is still a little bit. I love it. I love it more now, but it's still a tool as a whole picture of a song. Whereas the double bass is actually resonates
your
with
voice.
my heart and soul. Yeah, I think so. I've played it. I actually played it a lot more in the last 20 years than electric, in a sense of it's a solo instrument. And
so I mean, it's grunge. What made you pick up double bass?
I found one in my high school's, another high school's storeroom that had been sitting there for years on loan.
And you went. Well, I mean, you can't really sneak out a double bass, can you?
Sorry, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it was kind of a little bit like that. And my dad drove me over, and I think I've got permission. Yeah, I think we've got one at the other school, and I was getting interested in jazz at the time. So that's really what it was. It was like realizing that the double bass is was the sound of the jazz that I was listening to. I'm certainly still not saying it's the only bass for jazz or anything, but it was, and I was intrigued, and I got really got stuck into make up for lost time,
Okay.
Yeah.
Private lessons?
I got classical lessons. I was in a country town, so I was limited.
Okay. Where was this, sorry?
This is in Dubbo in New South Wales.
Okay.
So I had classical lessons off a lady called Sam Harvey, who was there, I think she'd gone through the college, so she gave me those 2 Samantha books, which I've still got. And if I have students, that's still the 2 books I tell them to get. Yeah. And she got my left hand kind of position really going, that big C kind of thing. And she told me like it was like holding an orange, And I remember feeling that was, for the first time that I'd never really had electric bass lessons, I don't think. So I felt like, okay, this is resonating with me. And so as far as formal training, that was the first year, and then the next year I went to the Conservatorium in Sydney, and I'd only been playing that for about a year, so I must have really got stuck into it. Yeah. And that was and then I had lessons off Craig Scott at the Conservatorium for the couple of years that I was there. Yeah.
And so the kind of bass players or jazz you were checking at the time would be.
Well, I went and had a lesson off Craig Scott, and I wouldn't know much. We're talking, pre-internet, pre-anything, and also Dubbo was like, if I wanted to order I'd order a Stanley Clarke record in, the live 70s one, Yeah. And that would take 6 weeks to come in, and I'd treasure it, as you did in those days. You really did treasure a record, and you would check it out properly. So I was into that, and then I went and had a lesson off Craig Scott, and he said, right, so the double bass now, right? So you have to check out Ray Brown, and and Sam Jones, and all these guys, Paul Chambers, and all these guys. And so at the end of the lesson, I got my money out to pay him, and he said, no, you take that money and you go down to these second-hand record stores at the time. So it was, I'm not showing my age by saying that it was all vinyl. Then these are, you know, these were
Still
relics
there,
at the
probably.
time. It was like mid-90s, and but he just said that was a cheap way of doing it, and made me go and buy all this Ray Brown record. Ray Brown was the first guy that I really fell in love with. You know, and I think that's a good way to start in that sense. Well, it was weird. I was like Stanley Clarke and Ray Brown, you know, and they sound very different. Because probably coming from the electric bass side of things, it was that, and then, but I fell in love with Ray Brown's sound and concept and musicality and just that sound, that groove, that thing that makes you want to move and dance, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I got into that, and I'm still checking that out.
Electric bass kind of fell by the wayside for a few years?
Not really. Okay. It's always been both. I think when you're in your early 20s or late teens, you always think you're going to pick something and pick one and pick an instrument or pick a style, and so I, like anyone, thought that, and I just never did. I just still loved playing rock, original music, funk, soul thing, and then jazz. But and then I've gotten better at actually combining the two and just being one bass player, I hope, in all of that. You know, being just myself in all of it, bringing the jazz to the rock and bringing the rock to the jazz, and everything in between.
And people frowning at you in both camps, or?
So no, not really. No, because then it's you know, it's yourself, it's your heart and soul. It's all it's the your own grit that that you can put into it. So I'm glad I never really necessarily stopped doing one or the other. I mean, when I was at the conservatorium, even I was playing in a rock band. I had a rock band that I got together from high school. So 10 years before that, you know, well, we formed my rock band, which was called Drown, and then 22, some suitable grunge names there, you know, early 90s.
Optimistic.
Yeah, optimistic. That's right. So they'd moved to Sydney, and we kept it going even when I was at the con. But I was getting really interested to jazz, so I didn't have a lot of time for that. But we kept it going, and that rhythm section actually became Thirsty Merc years later in 2002.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that, but that's actually how that came about. So, but it was just an educational process as well, you know. And I never stopped liking doing the other music. I didn't sort of become a jazz snob or something. It was like I said, an educational process that it opened up a harmonic world to me. That was great for songwriting as well, you know.
Yeah. So you were at the con for what, 3-4 years?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, I would say that for 2 years. That's all I ever intended to do. Some other friends stayed longer and did 4 years, but I was fortunate enough to meet great trumpet player James Morrison, multi-instrumentalist, and I don't mean the British one that you might know, the UK one, the Australian one.
Strange,
and I won a scholarship that he gives out for young musicians when I was 19.
Okay.
And that was my second year of the con. And then the same year he needed a bass player for his band. Just so called me up and basically got a full-time gig with him, and that really was quite well, not full-time in the sense that I didn't do anything else, but it was weekly. We had gigs.
It's a big gig, yeah.
Yeah, it was a big gig, especially for a 19-year-old, inexperienced. Big learning curve. Those few years, I mean,
that's huge. 2 years at con and then playing with James Morrison.
It's huge. I mean, it's a huge time. It's a huge time for anyone. Those 2 years when you leave school, anyway.
Yeah.
Because you're just doing music full time. You're not having to go to maths and science classes.
That's it. Yeah.
Certainly was for me, because then I started to go on the road towards the second year of the con. I'm like, well, I'm not going to stay around at the con because it's designing. It's supposed to be preparing me to do exactly what I'm doing now. Yeah. I better learn more on the road and be diligent. And they were
some good guys in the band to learn from.
Yeah. At that stage, James's band was James's brother John on drums, Peter Zografakis on guitar, who you may or may not know. He sort of dropped out of the scene a few years ago. He's an amazing musician all over. And Emma Pask singing, and Darren Percival, who some people might know as Mr. Percival, who does this looping thing, incredible vocalist. and Blaine Whitaker on sax was there a lot as well, and then some interchanging drummers after that.
Okay.
So yeah, I was the young guy, and
yeah, right.
I'm not the young guy in the band sometimes now, but
yeah.
often now. But they were some great years, and I played with James, and I still play with him sometimes. 20 years. I mean,
yeah. And so was that all upright or a mix?
That was mostly upright, but
Okay.
James, being James, likes to do projects to push himself as well. So there's been some things that are electric bass projects, or I'd play electric bass on the same gig, some gospel music and some funk soul music. So I would play, and I think he liked the fact that I played, electric as well.
Did you ever play fretless on the?
I've more recently
got
into the fretless a bit. Just got it's one of the only new instruments I ever owned was a Fender fretless jazz bass, that I've got that I love playing with. It's got flat wounds on it, and so no, not so much to replace the double, more like a different thing.
Just
so
a different colour.
Usually my P bass that I would play, and as part of the set.
Yeah. So you've been a P bass guy, kind of from apart from the 24th fret.
You've had that big hunk of
monster, yeah.
What was that? I can't remember what that was.
An Ibanez or something?
Yeah, West Tone.
West Tone, yeah.
Yeah, it's cool with switches and it's like you wish you still had it. What did I sell it? Like a couple $100. What was it? I think the guy who bought that might have taken the frets off or something. Made that into a fretless.
Was it one of the kind of natural wood ones that kind of looked like an alembic kind of thing?
Yeah, it was.
So the Stanley Clark, and you went.
Probably. Yeah. And I bought a Yamaha thing, like a new Yamaha thing, and then my first Fender bass, which is a 90s jazz bass, and I bought it in the 90s, like a 95 jazz bass that I bought in 95, almost,
Now it's vintage.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, which I loved, and that was my main bass for 10 years until I got the P bass, and then I got that sort of
P-bass thing.
The P-bass itch.
So many people, it just happens to so many of us, we start off playing the 6 strings and the jazzies, and and then you get that P-bass and you're like, oh, this makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
In a lot of respects.
It was that low mid grind and that really sat well with me, and it sat well with me as a double bass player too.
Yeah. The simplicity of it, where the tone comes from here mainly.
The one I've got as well is 1978 when it's a real heavy piece of wood, and I can cane it if I'm not necessarily the lightest player on it, so
is that obviously joking that's from the upright
I think
thing?
so. Yeah. A lot of it, so that takes it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you listen to Stanley and Patitucci play electric, and you can hear that.
Yeah.
The digging in.
Yeah.
I think comes from the upright.
Yeah.
Years of playing the upright kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So you didn't have a Jackal thing? He wasn't really on your radar?
I loved to listen to it,
yeah.
And he's one of my favourite musicians.
But I mean, back when you were kind of...
No,
starting
it was Ray Brown. It was, my uncle had given me some weather report things, and I loved listening to it. With Stanley Clark and then all the jazz guys. Dave Holland and a really heavy Dave Holland phase.
Yeah.
But as far as electric bass, no, I never really went into that to try and do that. There's guys that do that much better than me, so in more recent years, maybe even a little more than other times, because you're like, I haven't, really.
You're coming from it at it now from a different perspective. Back then, it's kind of like, I need to be like that, or you feel that pressure to whatever you're checking out. You kind of, that's what you got to aspire to be. Whereas now, I think you're probably at a stage where you can just accept something for what it is and enjoy it, and take from it what you want.
Well, I mean, you never stop learning, and you keep going back as well and reminding yourself. I went back and listened to Paul Chambers the other day. I was like, oh wow, Paul Chambers is at the center of the time so much, and the lines, and he's playing the gut strings and the way he would, consistency. So I remember Craig Scott at the con telling me to try and be someone for 6 months and be someone else for 6 months, and then I'm not sure how as a student I went with that completely, but it was Scott LaFaro was a big influence, still is. So the Jacko thing was just more. It's also more his spirit. I mean, you know, like it's the same thing as trying to get influenced by other things than music. I mean, you know, I write music based as much on the closing credits and the feeling of a movie as I do on listening to a great album, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's, in a way, it can be more authentic that way because you're not actually getting off on a tonal thing or that you think you're going to copy. It can sort of be a springboard to something a lot more original sounding if it's not a musical thing that you're influenced by.
Yeah.
And so with the Jarko thing, it would have been more just his spirit and his hardcore. How hardcore is that guy? Seem not just because of his hard living, but as an uncompromising musician, you see him on stage. It's like he owns it so much, and I'm like, well, that's command, and that's spirit, and that's authenticity, and those things more than the actual way he plays. I'm like, that's him. I'm not going to do it nearly as well as him. So
and you know, people connect with authenticity, I think, and honesty in performances and in songwriting.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've been writing pretty much since you started playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like playing, it's a skill set you've got to exercise, and I've gotten better and better at.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll get better and better at it. I was always writing for our grungy kind of band because our singer wasn't really writing, and so I'd sort of write the songs and he'd sing it, and then. So you're
writing lyrics and the music and stuff?
Yeah. I'd collaborate on some lyrics with our guitarist, who was very, very skilled musician in general, and and then later on I'd collaborate. I mean, Ray and I would collaborate on a few things on the first record, the first Thirsty Merc record, when that came out, 2003. And then since then I've gone on this long, slow journey of skill building of songwriting, and I've almost changed concepts on it, and I write from the piano a lot now. That's that's actually mostly what I play at home.
Okay,
it's the piano now, and I've done that for years. And it's one of the first things, because you have a piano at home in the family home.
Yeah.
That my dad had texted written the notes on. That was one of the first things I played, and that's something I've loved to have gotten better. That I've loved in getting better at. I wouldn't call myself a jazz piano player.
Yeah, but as a tool for writing.
Yes, a tool for writing, and I perform with it with vocals and that solo vocals, and and then that's kind of new, actually getting out there and doing that. But it's something I do every day, and I think about all day.
Yeah,
and I do for a few hours a day, and so that's been an exciting journey, and that continues to be. And that's one of the most exciting things I do now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that's never ending, right? We're going to write the song.
Yeah.
There's always something more. I mean, so are you composing, film scores or jazz songs?
No, it's mainly for projects. So I've got another band called House of Orange, which we've been together for as long as Thirsty Merc's been around, but we've because of life and careers, and we've lived in different countries, and we've been geographically challenged to sort of to do a lot of touring. But there was a period of a few years there we did a lot and put an EP and an album out. So I'd write particularly for that, which is a raucous three-piece. Jimi Hendrix meets the Police meets the Beatles or something.
Okay.
You just go and listen to it and make your own mind up about what it sounds like. But it's pretty proggy in a sense.
Are you singing in it?
Yeah, and I'm singing in that.
And playing bass?
And playing, bass. I play this, mostly this Gibson EB2 1968 thing that's had a neck break, and it's pretty thunderous kind of psychedelic bass, full on. And so I've been writing for that. And in the last couple of years, I've been writing for this Phil Stack solo project, which is piano based, stripped back a lot of it. Some of it's with some strings, some of it's solo piano, song-based sort of stuff. So I put out a EP called Lap Around the Sun in 2015, and that was stuff I did recorded at home mostly, or entirely almost, I think. Had a couple of friends play drums and guitar on it, and I actually ended up playing some guitar and drums on it as well.
So you got a bit of a studio set up
Yeah,
at
I've got
home?
a studio set up at home, and I always mix elsewhere. I'm not a mix engineer, so I'd never do that. I would take it somewhere and put it back through an SSL desk or a Neve desk through someone who does that. And I don't like looking at music, so I don't record on a computer. I record on an old hard disk recorder, and I basically use it like a digital tape machine.
Cool.
That's been working for me for the last 10 years. It's out of date, but it's I just bounce off WAV files, and and I don't, it doesn't do email, kind of thing. It's
you're not going to get messages on it.
Yeah, it's a good workflow. I don't like. There's a screen display on it that I just use for peak levels. That's the only thing I do. I don't.
Is it like a Mackie or a?
It's a Roland 24 BS thing, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And you still burn off discs with files on it that take ages overnight, But it works for me still, and like I said, I'd rather go to the studio then, and then they load it into Pro Tools, and if you do want to do any editing, you can do it there, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to look at music. What does music fucking look like? I mean, it's just...
Yeah, interesting. Because so much of today's music production is looking at the screen.
I don't understand it, and it doesn't... Yeah, usually it sounds like that to me, to be honest, a lot of the time. Yeah. There's good pizza and bad pizza and everything.
I did one album a year or two ago at a studio in Melbourne, the Aviary. I don't know if you know the Aviary. No. And that was to tape.
Yeah.
And I think there was maybe Pro Tools running as well, I'm not sure, but mostly to tape and no screen. And it was such a different experience going in, playing live, coming back in and listening and not looking.
Yeah.
Because if there's a visual element there, it's definitely going to take up some of your attention.
Well, it's going to make you possibly, not saying all, make you make some decisions that aren't based on what's actually going on here,
Yeah.
Well,
that's a cool concept.
What does the waveforms look like? Well, you don't want to be peaking and all that, but if you're doing certain types of music, you need to, but I'd prefer to do whole takes most of the time, and I do some little drop-ins with a foot switch or something, but I couldn't edit them again. I had to do them at a right time, or go back and do it, re-sing the backing vocals for the second chorus. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then that's what the Beatles were doing. It would have sounded different a little bit because it does build in the second chorus. I mean, and that doesn't mean just turning it up. It means slightly opening up a sound, a vowel sound, or certainly in the bass part, it's like trying to do full performances of it. I mean, that's the way
conceptual playing.
Yeah, and that's the way we found. Like I said at the beginning, it was the way we found the Merc stuff work, and we tried both ways. We've tried going and redoing like all the bass or whatever, and then just going back and going. The one I did when I was playing with the drums was, at the time when Carl Robertson, a great drummer, was our drummer, and we would sort of A/B it, and it was like that's just got vibe for days when we were playing together. And okay, I played a wrong note there. I fucked that up. So let's can I say fuck on this? Or?
Absolutely.
I say fuck. Don't say shit in front of the BABY. So you might fix that if it was an actual error,
Yeah.
But if there's just something that's getting a bit hairy, it's like, oh, it's cool. It comes back, and it's a good lesson to learn. Vibe over precision all times. That's my motto with rhythm section playing, especially. So I'd rather hear that than the other way. You get better at kind of doing both as you go on. Like you get better at everything, at being able to do it with precision as well as vibe, But if you're going to choose one, it's vibe over precision. Because I tell you what, all the processes of recording, it's like, what is it? Writing, rehearsing, pre-production, tracking, overdubbing, mixing, mastering, all these things make it slicker. And they just do, and that's okay. But it just brings everything together so much that it can become this homogenized nugget of rock that would, I remember jumping around the studio to those rhythm tracks, and now it's all, So if in some ways, either rock band especially, or even in a rock band playing pop songs, which is kind of what Thirsty Merc is, really, it is, the more spunk you put on it on the beginning, it's always going to be still too tight by the end. So don't worry about it so much. Just vibe over precision.
Have you had experiences in the studio with Thirsty Merc where you feel it's been overproduced by the end of it? Yeah,
look, I love all our records, and they've been done differently. The first two albums were done here in Melbourne, in Param, with a great producer called Lindsay Gravina, who's a bit of a 90s grungy icon. He also did those first Living End records, which are the big ones. Did some early stuff with Jet. He's done all the Magic Dirt records. So he's not an obvious choice for what you would think Thirsty Merc are, but...
Are you guys pretty rocking?
We're pretty rocking, but with sort of songs or something, pop songs in a way. And at the time we didn't know what we were doing. It was the first record, so it was more rocking on the first record than anything. We had this term, rock Sinatra, so it was kind of like... so there's songs like My Completeness, which is track one off the first record, which Ray and I wrote together. This is the time where you cut to that bit of that, is it? I don't know.
Yeah, a little snippet of that video clip from 19.
Yeah, which is kind of rock chords sung with Ray crooning, kind of, because Ray's a great jazz musician and over rock beats kind of thing. Flowing down in blue cascades, love laughing at her feet, life dancing in a masquerade, my completeness. How do we get into that? Where do we get?
Overproduced.
Yeah, so that album was all done to tape. So certainly not overproduced, but it becomes tighter and more together as those processes go along. And then we did slideshows with Lindsay, bit slicker again. It usually happens with a band. You're older, a bit more ballad playing, a bit more acoustic guitars in the record. That's cool. And then
a bit more check this out.
Less raucous bass playing, like more. Everyone has sort of gone through breakups, and it's the breakup record. But that's cool. That's part of the journey of the record, and we had some great songs off that. 20 Good Reasons was off that, and The Hard Way, which is rocking but still a bit with a emotive life story.
Which one had summertime?
Summertime. That was the first one.
Right. Okay.
No click track, by the way.
I had to learn that a few weeks ago for a gig.
Did you?
Yeah.
No click track, rhythm section, acid ears. And then obviously you open up vocals and stuff like that.
Still sounds great.
Yeah, you don't notice that it's got, it's click track and all those sort of things. And we didn't do everything without a click track. Does this one going to sound better with it, this one without? And inevitably, as things go on, you're using more click tracks, and all that kind of thing. But that's an interesting thing about that, a little tidbit about that song that people might not know. And it's just playing together and getting the swagger and the swing and not the right amount of swagger and swing in the playing, ding 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 ding, just getting the right amount. And then so we went on to slideshows and then some of that was mixed in LA, so it's starting to get slicker a little bit, and then the third album was the LA album. As Lindsay Gravina, our producer in Melbourne, said, on the third album, because he talks like that, you'll go to Classy Town. What's Classy Town, Lindsay? Like, you'll probably go to LA and do it with one of those slick guys. And that, I think you should, kind of thing. He's been part of our whole journey.
So he prophesized that?
Kind of, yeah. Like he's cool with it. He wants us to always go to Classy Town. Anyway, interestingly enough, we went over there and did that, and we had a bunch of great songs, and it was going a bit more groove based anyway, you know. And bands like Maroon 5 would come out, and you know, we'd actually tour with them and at the time as well.
Cool.
And we thought, and the label thought at the time, because we were with Warner Music then, that that would be the right thing to do, because Ray was playing keyboard a lot more, and it was a lot more groove based, and maybe the climate of music, of pop music at the time, was a bit more like that too.
So was it like 2006 or 7?
That was later. That was Slideshows was 2006. This was 09, 10, and we ended up actually doing it with Maroon 5's producer Matt Wallace, who's actually best known for doing all Faith No More's records.
Cool.
So we did
big bass tone.
Yeah, yes, but interestingly enough, I mean, not my favourite record of us, but not because of the song, just partly the production, the LA thing. I'm glad we did it, you know. But looking back, it's like, okay, well, we did the LA record. But
did you have some fun?
We had a great time. We recorded at Sound City, you know, before Dave Grohl had bought the desk for $1 million, you know, before it. So I think we were in there in one of the last years, certainly the last year maybe that it was open. And I remember, because that was the only Neve desk that had never been moved apparently in the world, so they say. He...
It sounds more grounded.
Sorry?
It sounds more grounded, you know, that Neve desk.
Well, it was, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, well, you know, Nevermind had been recorded there, and Fleetwood Mac's Rumours had been recorded there, so there was a lot of history in that studio. And so we tracked the thing there, and then we went across the street to Matt Wallace's Little's place, you know. And look, Matt did a great job, but again, those processes I was talking about, they make it a lot slicker, possibly than I would do it myself. But you know, you respect the new producer that we don't know as well, and you go with what they're you know, suggesting. So that's the kind of one I probably redid a lot more bass parts than I want to, you know, for example. And that's okay. That's how that record came out, and that's how that sounded. But you learn a lot about your own intuition and what you.
It's always hard to, you know, hand over your musical baby to somebody else. To realise the vision, you know.
It is.
I think most of the stuff that I've been involved in, I've pretty much done it myself, you know, production wise and stuff like that. Partly due to money, partly due to, you know, I know what the aesthetic is.
That's what everyone's doing these days, of course.
You know, and the idea of thinking about this next thing I'm doing, the idea of maybe handing it off to somebody else to mix or whatever, is just like, I don't know, you know. Just getting that balance right is tough.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never.
Because one man's polished as another man's rough, and so it's all relative.
Well, that's right. Depends how you hear music, you know. It just depends. You can be at the front of hearing a live band and going, why can't you hear that the bass is too loud or whatever? Well, bass would never be too loud, of course.
Cut.
Yeah, but that's the way they're hearing it, and that's cool. And look, that album, Mousetrap Heart, was it's supposed to be a bit slicker. Like I said, it's a more keyboard groove based thing, and Matt had vast experience doing that, and so he knew more than any of us about doing it. But look, it made us realise, you know, we almost sort of pushed against that for the latest record, Slideshows. We came back to Lindsay and we want to do like the first record again, basically. Not even like the second record, we want like the first record. We want to make a rock record again. And we're independent now, so by this time, like everything was, a major label.
Kind of like what Metallica did.
Kind of, yeah. Without the $40,000 psychiatrist.
Where's your documentary?
That's right.
And did you get $1 million to rejoin the band?
Right. Yeah.
So from what I can gather, did Ray kind of stay out in LA for a little bit?
Yeah, so around that time, Ray was spending more time in LA and writing stuff for his own solo projects. And we were all doing other projects, which we do half the year anyway. We don't tour the whole year now like we did back in the old the older days, you know. But you still get a couple of years. I reckon it's about two and a half years from go to woe of the start of a recording project to the end of the touring cycle. So that's what shifting gears was. So we'd come back and Ray was in LA half the year, and we were just doing these little tours, and we're like, let's go and do a new record. And by this stage we were self-managed. Mm-hmm. The label was finished. We'd gotten out of that deal, and the music industry's changing, but we've still got new music in us. We're not just we don't just want to be playing the old Australian hits that we have, which we're very fortunate to have, but we've got music in us, and especially when it was no one, telling us to go and write another 13 demos or something. I was like, no, we've got enough songs here that are a picture. And we sort of did that ourselves. We had 30 weird demos or some rough piano takes that Ray had just done, and then we talked to Lindsay about arranging all those. Getting off the track there, what did you say before that?
So Ray was staying in LA, and my question was going to be, has that ever crossed your mind to
move over?
Or
I went over. I mean, I go over every year for something or other, or just to spend a couple of weeks. But New York's my town. I'm not a real massive fan of LA. I'd go there and visit friends, and it's obviously often you have to go there on the plane on the way. Yeah. Maybe not for too much longer. And I went to New York for 3 months in 2009, more on a jazz mission at the time, because the band was having quite a long break at that stage. Yeah. And to be honest, none of us are even sure whether we would get back together. So that was after 2 albums. That was before Master Apart. And then Ray and I had a conversation and went, let's go and do another record, and let's do it in LA, and let's do that groove-based record we're talking about, which became Master Apart. So no, I've never really... I considered it then, 2009, about moving over, and I miss the affiliations I had with some bands here, with the guys from House of Orange who we were writing stuff, and it was stuff that didn't sound like anything exactly, completely, and you can do that anywhere, but I built up a rapport with some musicians here, and I also love the magic of going to New York for a few weeks a year, or going there and doing some gigs, rather than it's just a hard town. It's a struggle. Yeah. Struggle town.
Ray seems to be doing okay.
Yeah, well, he's based in LA, so that's a different thing, and he loves it. He likes it. He just feels at home there, in as much as home there as he does here. So.
Yeah, New York would be a pretty scary place, I think, to kind of set up shop in. I think.
Yeah. Well, it's still magic to go to for a few weeks, and you can leave.
Yeah, in 10 days I saw so many amazing musicians.
You never say never. It's I might be there one day. I love living in Sydney, and I love coming to Melbourne all the time, and then going overseas, and then flying back into home.
You're gonna have your cake and eat it, essentially.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I mean, look, it is what it is. It's and look, the world's a smaller place now with that little boxes we have, and you can do what you do and be
anywhere.
Be anywhere in a sense.
So what's next for you?
The next thing is we're finishing this tour, so we're sort of halfway through, and it always extends out. We always sort of get, the last few years the pattern has been October, November, December, and then because of the way it works, you're on the radar of the Australian scene a bit, so you get more things get booked. Okay. So we go through a March or something. I do some jazz things in between. Yeah. And then
to pay the bills.
Right. I'm not sure which one pays the bills. As such, it's an interesting thing. I still love doing both things, as long as it's good music with good people. And I'm doing a lot more writing, like I said, from that piano-based thing. So I'm going to put out another EP or something. I just put out a single thing called Celebrate Life recently that I just put online. I don't even know how. I don't even know how to put out music now, really. Like a lot of people, I'm guessing, So I'm just doing that track by track. And I'm interested to see where that journey takes me musically, because that's it's kind of cool. No one's waiting for that, or there's no expectation on that, in a sense, because it's my solo stuff. It's not that well known. It's I don't write it with any sort of, you know, a commercial audience in mind or a certain demographic or anything. It's just really is whatever comes out, and I'm probably putting a bit more jazz in that now than it's in. That's another funny thing. But you know, some people have said, why don't you play more double bass on stage with me, or this and this? And it's like, I haven't naturally heard it. Like I don't want to force anything. It doesn't. Getting back to that honesty comment before, you know, I've got to it has to get there organically in its own way for it to be real for me. So I'm just getting there a bit with some of the writing that I'm doing, based from the piano, and so probably another release of Phil Stack solo stuff. That's probably what the next thing would be, and eventually I'd like to do the solo double bass record that I've been talking about for ages, you know, because I do a few gigs like that.
Solo double bass?
Yeah.
Right.
So because depending who you talk to, some people know me as playing with Thirsty Merc, who also plays jazz, and then there's all the jazz guys who are like, and you're also in Thirsty Merc, you know, it's the other way around for them, you know.
Yeah.
So and for me, it's just combining all of it to be myself wherever it is. Like I said that thing before, putting the rock and the jazz and the rock, for better or worse.
So what would a solo double bass? I mean, with looping, or just, you know, kind of free flowing?
At this stage, for me, I feel it's more engaging and challenging to hold a room with just the one instrument, literally, and I like doing that. So
brave.
Yeah, it is. So I haven't put a lot of that out, but I've got recordings of that, and I did a little show recently, and I would probably put some of that online. That so maybe some content you can use for that.
Cool.
That's sort of they're little motives, little pieces, some standards that I just sort of arranged double bass, and that's the most freeing and actually the most from here on the spot that I can think of is playing double bass solo like that. Yeah.
Well, I guess like what we said earlier, you know, if it was a singer doing that, you wouldn't think twice about it being, you know, somebody on stage just singing. You go, cool, that's totally normal. But double bass, you'd be like, you know. But if it's that directly connected, then it makes sense. You know, that's your voice and your expression that's coming through. To be honest, the things that I hear now, writing wise, that I've heard so far in the last 10 years of that I know that I think about are two things. They're it's writing music based on the piano, songs, vocal songs, and solo double bass things, motives, pieces, and not really writing for a jazz group or, you know, or a bigger rock ensemble. You know, it's sort of those two things. So this is what I hear. Yeah, I guess you get that scratch itched by like Thirsty Merc and House of Orange and stuff like that. You don't necessarily need to, you know, that's kind of taken care of. That side. Kind of.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
In good ways, you know.
Yeah, in great ways, and and I feel just at home doing that. But when it just comes down to me and the most through soul coming out thing that I can think of are those two things. Yeah, and the immediate one is the double bass solo thing, because it's largely improvised sets. You try not to make them too long. Like a half an hour set is long enough of that. Yeah. So I'll do it on a bill with maybe the second set will be the trio with my the jazz trio, which is James Muller and Tim Firth. So sometimes I'd like to do a show like that.
Cool. Yeah. Exciting. Well, I reckon
that's
sounds
there. Good.
Yeah, man. Thanks very much for taking the time out.
Oh, no worries. No worries at all.
Great to chat.
That's a great thing you're doing.
My pleasure. You know, I love it. Phil Stack, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
See you guys.